a millionaire arrived home, unannounced at lunchtime, and couldn't believe what he saw. 30 years working like a dog to support 4 ungrateful children who didn't even know who their father was. And now, it turned out a housekeeper was worth more than all his bloodline put together. Mr. Arthur Kingston muttered these words inside his own car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He had just cancelled a business trip to New York that had been months in the making. 3 meetings with Arab investors, a dinner with the ambassador, the signing of an $800 million contract, all thrown away. Why? Because that morning, as he adjusted his tie in the airport hotel mirror, he felt a pang in his chest, a premonition. Something at his house was wrong, or worse, something was too right, and he hadn't noticed. Arthur was 60 years old, with disciplined, slicked-back gray hair, a short, ash-colored beard, and gray eyes that had seen his wife Beatrice die. It was exactly 1 year, 2 months, and 13 days ago. He wore a custom-made navy blue suit from Milan, an immaculate white shirt, and a dark tie. On his ring finger, he still wore his gold wedding band. He hadn't been able to take it off. The chauffeur looked at him in the rearview mirror. "Are you sure you don't want me to let the house know you're coming, Mr. Kingston?" "No, Robert, don't tell anyone. I want to see with my own eyes what's happening in my house when they think I'm not there." "Is something wrong, Mr. Kingston?" "That's exactly what I'm going to find out." The car glided through the tree-lined streets of Bellevue Hill. White mansions with black gates, gardeners pruning bougainvillea, nannies walking pedigree dogs. It was precisely 1 p.m. when the black Mercedes stopped in front of the gate of the Kingston residence. A 2-story colonial house with cream-colored walls, wrought iron balconies, and a perfectly manicured front garden. The house Beatrice had decorated stone by stone. The house where their 4 children had grown up. The house that since his wife's death, Arthur felt empty, even with 8 bedrooms. He got out of the car without waiting for the chauffeur, walked to the front door with a determined stride, took out his personal key, and opened it without ringing the bell. He wanted to surprise them. He needed to surprise them. For weeks he had been hearing uncomfortable rumors from his sister Rebecca. "Arthur, that new employee is poisoning the boys. Something strange is happening in your house. I've seen them holding hands with her in the kitchen." Holding hands, Arthur, with the housekeeper? He had laughed at first, then felt uneasy. And now, standing in the marble foyer of his own house, he felt his heart pound as it had when he was 20, sneaking into Beatrice's house to see her hidden from her father. He closed the door slowly, put his briefcase on the floor, and heard silence. A strange, different silence. It wasn't the cold, dead silence that had settled in the house after Beatrice's funeral. It was a different silence, warm, as if someone were breathing softly on the other side of a closed door. Arthur advanced down the hallway, treading carefully on the white marble, to make no noise. He passed the gilded mirror in the reception hall and saw his own reflection, an older, tired man, with eyes sunken from insomnia. He looked away. He hadn't recognized himself for months. He reached the double wooden doors of the main dining room. They were ajar. Through the crack, an aroma that paralyzed him wafted out. It smelled of fresh herbs, freshly baked bread rolls, chicken noodle soup with broth. It smelled exactly like when Beatrice was alive and cooked on Sundays. He felt his legs tremble. He pushed the door open slowly, just a few centimeters, enough to peek in without being seen. And then he saw his 4 sons, Matthew, Andrew, Daniel, and Samuel. They were sitting around the large dining table. All 4 wore impeccable black suits, white shirts, dark ties. All 4 had their heads bowed. All 4 had their hands clasped in front of their chests. And all 4 were praying, praying. Arthur felt the air leave his lungs. His sons didn't pray. They never had. He himself had made sure to raise them without religion, without church, without any of that old women's nonsense, as he used to say. Beatrice had cried many nights about it. She had begged him to let the children go to Sunday school. Arthur had always refused. "My sons will be businessmen, not altar boys." And now, a year after Beatrice's death, the 4 boys had their heads bowed, praying before eating, as if they had done it all their lives. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst came next. Behind the table, serving with a humble, silent smile, was her, the domestic employee, a young woman of about 30, fair-skinned, with an impeccable complexion and the cleanest green eyes Arthur had ever seen. Her dark brown hair was pulled back in a perfectly braided bun, without a single strand out of place. She wore the classic staff uniform his wife Beatrice had chosen years ago, royal blue with white details, an immaculate white collar, white cuffs on the sleeves, and a starched white apron that fell to mid-calf. She moved around the table with silent elegance, serving the soup with a silver ladle, whispering, "Excuse me, young man," each time she approached one of the boys. And the boys, his boys, the same ones who, a year ago, had mocked her on her first day in the house. The same ones who had bet money to see how long she would last before quitting in tears. Now they replied in soft voices, "Thank you, Hope." Hope, that was her name. Arthur had hired her almost 6 months ago without really looking at her. He had signed the papers unread, accepted the agency's recommendation, and forgotten her existence. To him, she was just another shadow in the house. A housekeeper, nothing. And now that shadow was doing what he, the father, hadn't achieved in 21 years, making his 4 sons behave like human beings. Arthur felt something rise in his throat, something hot, something he couldn't control. He wanted to enter the dining room, shout, demand explanations, but his legs wouldn't respond. He stood there paralyzed, clinging to the doorframe like a shipwreck survivor clinging to a plank. Matthew, the eldest, was the first to lift his head after the prayer. He was 21 years old. He had Beatrice's refined features and Arthur's square jaw. His eyes, which a year ago had only expressed arrogance and contempt, now shone with something akin to peace. "Hope," Matthew said softly, "can I ask you a favor?" "Whatever you command, young Matthew," she replied, bowing her head slightly. "Please, sit with us. Today is a special day. Young man, you know I can't. My place is to serve." "No, please, just today. It's Mum's birthday. She would have been 52 today." Arthur felt his world collapse. Beatrice's birthday. He had forgotten it. He, the husband, the widower, had forgotten his own dead wife's birthday, but his sons hadn't. His sons had remembered it and had organized a special lunch with prayers, with flowers, with chicken noodle soup, Beatrice's favorite dish, and with the domestic employee as an honored guest. Hope lowered her gaze. Arthur saw her green eyes well up with tears. He saw her put her hand to her chest, as if to contain something. "Young Matthew," she murmured, "don't worry about me. I'm just here to serve you. Your mum is watching over you from heaven. That's what's important." Samuel, the youngest, the most rebellious, the one who had been expelled from 3 high schools for bad behavior, stood up from his chair, walked to where Hope was, took her hand respectfully, and said something that completely shattered Arthur. "You're also our mum, Hope, even if you don't want to be." Arthur put his hand to his mouth to prevent a shout. Tears rolled down his face uncontrollably. He cried in silence, hidden behind his own dining room door, watching a scene he had not built. A scene that belonged to another man, to a father who had been present, to a husband who had loved his wife to the end. And then, as the 4 boys smiled and Hope tried to hide her tears, Arthur saw something on the dining room wall that finally broke his soul in 2. 3 framed portraits, 3 photographs of his children when they were small boys, dressed in white shirts, smiling at the camera like angels. Photographs he remembered seeing last in an old box in the basement. Photographs Beatrice had kept with devotion for years. Photographs he had ordered, stored after the funeral, because he couldn't bear to see them. Someone had rescued them, someone had cleaned them, someone had carefully framed them, and that someone was standing in the middle of the dining room, serving soup to his sons with the same love Beatrice would have done. Arthur stumbled backward, bumping into a vase in the hallway. The sound of glass shattering on the marble echoed throughout the house. The 4 boys turned. Hope slowly turned her body, and the domestic employee's green eyes met the millionaire's gray eyes for the first time in 6 months. She froze with the ladle in her hand. He froze with tears on his face. Matthew sprang up. "Dad!" Arthur couldn't respond. He could only think one thing, just one, before his whole world came crashing down. Who is this woman, and why did she arrive at my house a year too late? 6 months earlier, the Kingston house was a hell with crystal chandeliers. Beatrice Kingston had been dead for 6 months, and the family was crumbling like a sandcastle under the tide. Arthur had taken refuge in business trips. Tokyo, Dubai, Frankfurt, Sao Paulo, anywhere away from that Bellevue Hill mansion, where every corner smelled of his wife's perfume. He returned to Australia only to sign contracts, sleep 3 nights in his empty bedroom, and then rush out again. His 4 sons saw him pass through the house like a ghost in a tie, and while the father fled, the 4 boys tore apart what was left. Matthew, the eldest, had abandoned his law degree at the University of Sydney. He said university was for losers and spent his days driving the Porsche his father had given him before the funeral. He arrived home at 4 a.m., smelling of whiskey and cheap perfume, and the next day woke up at 2 p.m., yelling at the staff that the coffee was cold. Andrew, the second, had decided to become a digital entrepreneur, which meant he locked himself in his bedroom with his computer until dawn and squandered his mother's inheritance on online sports betting. He had lost over $3 million, and no one in the house knew. Daniel, the third, was the quietest and most dangerous. He had fallen into drugs 6 months before Beatrice died. Cocaine on weekends at first, then weekdays, then every day. His mother had discovered him one night and locked herself in the bathroom, crying for 4 hours. 3 weeks after that night, Beatrice had fainted for the first time. The cancer was too advanced, and Samuel, the youngest, the family's baby, Beatrice's favorite, had been expelled from 3 high schools in 2 years. The last time was for punching an MP's son during a drunken fight at a nightclub in Bellevue Hill. Arthur had paid $3 million to keep the matter out of the newspapers. 4 sons, 4 failures, 4 young men with an expensive surname and destroyed souls. And in the midst of all that, one March morning, the doorbell rang. Mrs. Jenkins, the housekeeper, who had been with the family for 22 years, opened the door. It was she who managed the house because Arthur wouldn't, and the boys couldn't. But Mrs. Jenkins was already 68, her back bent with arthritis, and she had been diagnosed with advanced diabetes 2 months earlier. She needed to retire, and before leaving, she had promised to find someone to replace her. At the door stood a young woman. She wore a simple grey dress, worn black shoes, her dark brown hair tied back in a discreet bun, and a plastic bag with her papers. She had no suitcase, no jewelry, only a look Mrs. Jenkins hadn't seen in any human being since she was a child in her Queensland outback town. "Good morning, madam. I'm here for the domestic employee position. The agency sent me. What's your name, dear?" "Hope Evans, at your service." Mrs. Jenkins looked her up and down. Too young, too pretty. Green eyes shone like 2 emeralds in a pale, drawn face. Her skin was impeccable but dry, as if this woman hadn't slept well in years. Her hands were delicate but calloused. A woman's working hands. "How old are you?" 30, madam. "Married, widowed, children?" Hope hesitated for a second. Just 1 second. Then she replied firmly, "No, madam, I don't have children." Mrs. Jenkins didn't press. In 22 years of service, she had learned that some questions shouldn't be asked twice. "Come in, dear. I'll explain how this house is." Hope entered the marble foyer, looked up at the 6-meter ceilings, at the Murano crystal chandeliers, at the carved wooden stairs. She didn't open her mouth. She didn't sigh. She showed no admiration. She simply looked at everything with the same calm with which one looks at any landscape. And Mrs. Jenkins knew, in that instant, that this woman wasn't there for the money. "This house, dear, has 4 demons, 4 young men, the employer's sons. The lady of the house, Mrs. Beatrice, may she rest in peace, died 6 months ago. Since then, the boys have been unbearable. I'm telling you up front so you don't come to quit in the first week." "I won't quit, madam. They all say that." The last employee lasted 4 days. Young Matthew threw a plate of hot soup in her face because it was lukewarm. The one before her lasted 9 days. Young Samuel locked her in the basement as a joke and forgot to let her out. She spent the night there. "I won't leave, madam." Mrs. Jenkins narrowed her eyes. "Why are you so sure?" Hope looked towards the window, towards the garden, towards a bird's nest in the branch of an ash tree. "Because I have nowhere else to go, madam." Mrs. Jenkins felt a shiver, not of fear, but of something akin to respect. "I'll hire you. You start tomorrow at 6 a.m. "Thank you, madam. God bless you." That same night, Hope arrived with only a small suitcase. They put her in the staff quarters at the back, a simple room with a single bed, a wooden wardrobe, and a shared bathroom. Hope unpacked in silence. 3 uniforms, 2 street dresses, a rosary, a worn Bible, and a small framed photograph that she immediately hid in her sock drawer. No one saw the photograph. No one knew then that in that photo there was an 8-year-old boy smiling with a baseball cap, holding a red balloon at a country fair. The next day, at 6:30 a.m., Hope knocked on the main dining room door with the breakfast tray. Matthew was there, eating alone, his gaze lost on his phone. He was hungover. He wore the same shirt as the night before. When Hope entered, he didn't even look up. "Old woman, how long are you going to take?" "I'm in a hurry." Hope placed the tray on the table without a word. She poured his coffee, adjusted his napkin, and as she leaned to place the plate of eggs, Matthew looked up and saw her for the first time. He froze. Hope's green eyes had something Matthew couldn't identify at that moment. A deep calm, a total absence of fear, a gaze that didn't judge, but also didn't allow itself to be trampled. "And who the hell are you?" Matthew asked, lowering his voice without realizing it. "Hope, young man, the new employee. Mrs. Jenkins hired me yesterday." "Well, nice to meet you, Hope. Welcome to hell." And something Matthew didn't expect happened here. Hope smiled, not mockingly, not fearfully, but with a serene, almost maternal smile. "Young man, I've been to hell once. This place doesn't quite compare yet." Matthew dropped his fork. "What?" "That here, you still have the sun coming through the windows, young man. That's a lot." Hope left the dining room with the same calm with which she had entered. Matthew stared at his plate of eggs for 5 minutes without moving. He didn't know what had happened to him. He didn't know why the coffee suddenly tasted different. He didn't know why, for the rest of the day, he couldn't get the soft voice of that woman out of his head, saying, "This place doesn't quite compare to hell." The other 3 brothers discovered Hope over the first week, each in their own way. Andrew met her when she entered his bedroom with clean sheets, and found him crying in front of his computer, because he had just lost $80,000 in a bet. Hope didn't ask anything. She just left the folded sheets on the chair, put a hand on the boy's shoulder for just a second, and left. Without a word, Andrew continued crying for another 10 minutes. Then he closed his computer. That night, he didn't bet. Daniel met her one dawn when she came upstairs at 5 a.m. and found him collapsed in the hallway, unconscious, his mouth full of foam. Hope didn't scream, didn't run to wake anyone. She knelt beside the boy, turned his head to the side, cleaned his mouth with a cloth, carried him as best she could to his bedroom, and put him to bed. She watched over him until he woke at 11 a.m. When Daniel opened his eyes and saw her sitting at the foot of his bed with a rosary in her hand, for the first time in 2 years, he felt something akin to shame. And Samuel, the youngest, the most rebellious, met her the day he decided to test her. He locked a funnel web spider inside the wardrobe drawer where Hope kept her uniforms. Hope opened the drawer that night, saw the spider, caught it with a glass, took it out to the garden, and released it under a bush. The next day, she told Samuel in the hallway without reproach, "Young man, the spider you put in my drawer is now alive in the garden. If you want it back, I left it there, but I ask you a favor. Next time, just talk to me. There's no need to send messengers with venom. I will listen." Samuel was speechless. Within 2 weeks, the 4 brothers had stopped fighting at the table. Within 4 weeks, they had stopped yelling at the other employees. Within 8 weeks, Matthew had returned to university. Andrew had stopped gambling. Daniel had entered a discreet rehabilitation program, and Samuel had started helping Hope clear the dishes after dinner. No one in the house understood what was happening. Mrs. Jenkins understood. She understood from the first day when she saw how Hope looked at the boys. She didn't look at them as employees look at employers. She didn't look at them with fear. She didn't look at them with resentment. She looked at them as a mother looks at her lost children, with a silent tenderness that demanded nothing in return. One night, Mrs. Jenkins entered the kitchen and found Hope crying silently in front of the stove while stirring a pot of chicken noodle soup. "What's wrong, dear?" "Nothing, madam. It's just that this soup smells exactly like the one I used to make for my..." Hope fell silent. Mrs. Jenkins didn't ask more, but that same night, before going to bed, Hope took the small framed photograph of the boy with the cap and the red balloon from her sock drawer. She kissed it, hugged it to her chest, and whispered something only she heard. "My son, forgive me for taking care of these 4. Forgive me for still being alive. If God allows me, I will try to save them as I couldn't save you." She put the photograph away, turned off the light, and on the other side of the Atlantic, in a suite at the Burj Al Arab in Dubai, Mr. Arthur Kingston signed a millionaire contract without having the slightest idea that the woman who was going to change his life had just kissed the photograph of a dead child in the staff quarters of his own house. The first silent miracle. Story. A millionaire arrives home unannounced at lunchtime and cannot believe what he sees. "You starved housekeeper. Who gave you permission to touch my mum's things?" Matthew shouted from the second floor. His voice echoed through the mansion like thunder. It was 11 a.m. on a Saturday. The boy came down the stairs stomping, still in his pajamas, his jaw clenched and his eyes red with rage. Hope was kneeling in the main hallway downstairs, with a damp cloth in one hand and an old frame in the other. She had just come up from the basement. She had been asking Mrs. Jenkins for 3 weeks for permission to go down to that dark, damp room where the family's old things were stored. Mrs. Jenkins had hesitated. "Dear, those boxes haven't been touched since we buried Mrs. Kingston. The employer ordered them not to be touched." But Hope had insisted with that soft voice of hers. "Madam, I just want to clean a little. I won't take anything out without permission." And the day before, While tidying some dusty cardboard boxes, Hope found 3 silver frames wrapped in yellowed newspaper. She unwrapped them carefully. 3 photographs of the Kingston brothers when they were children. 3 blonde and brunette angels smiling at the camera, dressed in white shirts, embraced by a young, beautiful woman who had the same smile as Samuel. Mrs. Beatrice. Hope had sat on the basement floor and cried in silence for 10 minutes. Then she had carried the photographs to the main hallway, cleaned them one by one with a damp cloth, and was arranging them on the white wall, when Matthew came down shouting, "I'm talking to you, housekeeper. Who gave you permission?" Hope didn't turn around. She continued wiping calmly, as if the shout hadn't existed. "Young Matthew, good morning. Would you like me to serve you breakfast?" "I don't want breakfast. I want you to leave my mum's things alone. You have no right to touch them. You're an employee. You're not family. You're nothing in this house." Mrs. Jenkins appeared in the hallway, alarmed by the shouting. Andrew came halfway down the stairs. Daniel poked his head out of the study door. Samuel stood on the landing, observing. Hope hung the first portrait on the wall. She straightened it carefully. Then she turned to Matthew with her hands crossed over her apron. "Young man, you are absolutely right. I am no one in this house. I am just the new employee, and I apologize if I offended you by putting up these photographs without asking your permission first. Take them down. Take them down right now." "Yes, young man, I will take them down if you order me to." Hope reached for the frame she had just hung, but before touching it, she paused. She looked into Matthew's eyes without defiance, without fear, with a tenderness that disarmed the boy. "Young Matthew, may I tell you just one thing before I take it down?" Matthew clenched his fists. He wanted to shout again, but couldn't. That woman's voice entered his ears like warm water. "Speak. Your mum kept these portraits in the basement because you asked her many years ago to take them down. Do you remember, young man?" Mrs. Jenkins told me. "You were 14 years old. You were embarrassed for your friends to see pictures of you when you were little. You told your mum, 'Mum, take down those ridiculous photos. I look like I'm 5 years old.' And your mum took them down to the basement, but she didn't throw them away, young man. She wrapped them in newspaper. She kept them carefully, hoping that someday you would want to see them again." Matthew felt the air leave his chest. He remembered. He remembered perfectly. He was 14 years old. He had invited Andrew Smith and Paul Riley to the house, and had been mortified when they saw photos of him at 5 years old in the hallway. That same night he had rudely told his mother to take them down. Beatrice had smiled sadly. She had taken the photos down without protesting. Matthew never asked where they were again. And now, 7 years later, a domestic employee, who hadn't even known Beatrice, had found them in the basement, cleaned them, and hung them back on the wall. "How do you know that?" Matthew murmured, his voice broken. "Mrs. Jenkins told me. Young man, but I sensed it from the moment I opened the box in the basement. Mums keep the things their children don't want to see. They don't throw them away, they wait. Every mum waits." Hope lowered her gaze, reached out her hand again towards the frame. "I'll take it down, young man. Don't worry." "Wait," Matthew suddenly shouted. Hope stopped. The 2-1-year-old boy, the heir to the Kingston Empire, the owner of the Porsche, the one who a month ago had thrown a plate of eggs at an employee for serving them lukewarm, stood in the middle of the hallway with his eyes full of tears he didn't want to let fall. "Leave it," he said in a low voice. "Leave it where it is. Are you sure, young man? Leave it." Hope bowed her head, arranged the other 2 frames on the wall slowly, in silence. The 3 portraits hung side by side. Matthew at 5, with Andrew at 3 inches his arms, twins Daniel and Samuel at 2 inches a hammock, and all 4 together at 6, 8, 10 and 10 years old, sitting on a bench in the house garden. Matthew didn't move. He stood in front of the photographs for 45 minutes. Mrs. Jenkins left him alone. Hope continued with her duties in the kitchen. The other 3 brothers passed by the hallway one by one in silence. They looked at the portraits, looked at Matthew, and kept walking without saying anything. That same afternoon, while Hope cleaned the kitchen, Matthew entered without warning. He wore a clean shirt. He was shaved. His eyes were red, but his gaze was serene. "Hope." "Yes, young man. I want to apologize." Hope left the cloth on the table, dried her hands on her apron, looked at him with her usual calm. "Why, young Matthew?" "For this morning, for everything, for how I've treated you since you arrived, for how I treat Mrs. Jenkins, for how I treated my mum in the last years of her life." Hope didn't answer immediately. She took a clean handkerchief from her apron pocket and extended it to the boy. Matthew took it, sat in one of the kitchen chairs, and for the first time since his mother had died, he cried. He cried like a child. He cried for 20 minutes non-stop, his face buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed to come from deep within. Hope didn't hug him. She didn't say, "It's over." She didn't offer cheap comfort. She just stood there by the stove, pouring herself a cup of coffee, letting him cry in peace. When Matthew finished, he lifted his swollen face and said, "My mum would have looked after me like this, wouldn't she?" Hope nodded slowly. "Your mum would have looked after you like this, my son." Exactly like this. It was the first time she had called him, "my son." Matthew stood up, walked to the kitchen door, stopped in the doorway, and without turning, said, "Hope, my mum used to cook chicken noodle soup on Sundays. It was her favorite. Do you know how to make chicken noodle soup?" "I do, young man. Tomorrow is Sunday." "Yes, young man. Could you make it?" "I'll make it tomorrow, young man, for all 4 of you." Matthew nodded. He left the kitchen. Hope stood by the stove, her coffee cup trembling in her hand. The next day, Sunday, the 4 brothers had lunch together for the first time in 6 months. Chicken noodle soup with chicken broth, freshly baked bread rolls, white rice, and roast lamb with gravy. The same meal Beatrice made every Sunday. The 4 ate in silence. None dared to comment on what was happening, but when Hope brought them dessert, apple crumble with custard, also Beatrice's favorite, Samuel, the youngest, dropped his fork and said aloud, "Hope, did you ever cook for my mum?" Hope froze with the tray in her hands. "No, young man, I never knew your mum." "Then how do you know how to make her food exactly the same?" Hope looked towards the window. She took a moment to answer. "Young Samuel, some mums are similar. Mine cooked in a similar way. Maybe that's why." "Does your mum live?" "No, young man. She died many years ago." "And your dad? Do you have family too?" Hope hesitated. For the first time in 6 weeks, she hesitated. "I did, young man. Not anymore." Samuel didn't ask more, but that night, before sleeping, he sent a WhatsApp message to Matthew. "Brother, I think Hope is more alone than we are, and that's saying a lot." The following weeks were a silent miracle. Daniel started cooking alongside Hope on Saturdays. He said he liked the smell of fried onions in the morning because it reminded him of something he didn't know what it was. Hope never asked if he was still taking drugs, but one day, while they were peeling potatoes together, she said out of the blue, "Young Daniel, my younger brother died at 24 from an overdose. I found him in the bathroom of my house. His name was Jack. He was the kindest of my 4 brothers, the kindest and the most broken." Daniel dropped the knife. "Why are you telling me this, Hope?" "Because you don't know how beautiful the world will be when you get out of the hole, young man, and my brother didn't get to know it. I pray to God every day that you do." Daniel entered a serious rehabilitation program that same week, of his own free will, without anyone forcing him. Andrew, the gambler, started seeking Hope in the kitchen at night. He told her about his losses. He confessed he didn't know how he was going to get the money back. Hope didn't scold him. She didn't preach. She just served him a glass of warm milk with cinnamon, like my mum used to do for my dad when he was worried, and asked him what he wanted to study in life. Andrew told her he had always wanted to be an architect, that his dad had told him it was a career for starving artists. Hope replied, "Young man, starving artists don't build cathedrals. Starving artists laugh at those who do build them." Andrew enrolled in architecture 3 months later, and Samuel, the youngest, the most rebellious, became Hope's shadow. He accompanied her to the market, helped her carry bags. He sat on a stool in the kitchen while she kneaded dough for bread rolls and told him stories from when she was a child in her country town. Samuel discovered without realizing it that for years he had lacked a mother, that his mum, Beatrice, had been wonderful, but had been ill for the last 3 years of her life, that he, the baby of the house, had grown up without someone asking him how his day had gone. Hope asked him every day, "How was your school, young man? Did you eat well? Did you sleep?" Samuel pretended to be annoyed. Inside, he counted the hours until she asked him again. One night, late, Mrs. Jenkins entered the kitchen and found Hope sitting in a chair, looking at the boys' portraits she had hung in the hallway. She could see them from the kitchen because the door was open. Hope had the small photograph of the boy with the cap and the red balloon clutched to her chest. She was crying in silence. "Dear, what's wrong?" "Nothing, madam. It's just that. I'm betraying them." "Who?" "My child, my Jared. I haven't thought about him for 2 months. Every day I'm loving these boys as if they were mine, and my child is alone in heaven waiting for me." Mrs. Jenkins sat beside Hope, took her hand. "Dear, your child is not alone. Mrs. Beatrice is looking after him up there, and she sent you here to look after hers. Don't you see? It's a deal between 2 mums, one in heaven, one on earth." Hope looked at her with green eyes clouded with tears. Do you believe that, madam? Dear, I've been in this house for 22 years. I saw these 4 boys born. I saw Mrs. Beatrice die, and never in 6 months without her had I smelled chicken noodle soup on Sundays until you arrived. Yes, I believe it. I believe it with all my heart. That night, before sleeping, Hope kissed her son's photograph. She whispered, "My son, Mom is looking after other big children. Don't be angry with me. I promise that every time I cook the soup, I'll think of you first." She put the photograph away, turned off the light, and across the ocean, in a suite at the Mandarin Oriental in Hong Kong, Mr. Arthur Kingston received a message from his sister Rebecca that read, "Brother, we need to talk. That new employee is doing strange things in your house. They're going to steal your children from under your nose. Come back before it's too late." Arthur read the message, stared at the screen, and for the first time in 6 months, he thought about returning to Australia. A housekeeper cooking chicken noodle soup in the main dining room, with my nephews sitting as if she were their mum. Over my dead body, Arthur. Over my dead body. Mrs. Rebecca Kingston Villarreal entered the Bellevue Hill mansion on a Tuesday at 11 a.m. without warning, her heels clicking so forcefully that the marble of the foyer vibrated under her Italian shoes. She was 58, her dyed blonde hair perfectly straightened, gold jewelry up to her elbows, and a French perfume that could be smelled 3 meters away. She was Arthur's older sister. She wore a blood-red pantsuit and carried an Hermes bag as expensive as an average worker's car. And above all, she carried something more dangerous than everything else, a venomous suspicion in her head. Rebecca had been waiting for something in silence for 20 years. That something was the inheritance. Arthur and Beatrice had had 4 children. Rebecca had had none. Her husband, Mr. Patrick Villarreal, an old banker whom she had married for money at 28, had died without leaving her the fortune she expected. The banker's fortune had been distributed among the children of his first marriage. Rebecca had only received a house in Vaucluse and a modest pension by her standards. Therefore, since Beatrice's death, Rebecca had begun to calculate in silence. If the 4 nephews continued to be the disaster they were, drugs, gambling, expulsions, scandals, sooner or later Arthur would disinherit them. And then she, the elder sister, the only family the magnate had left, would inherit everything. The company, the properties, the Swiss account, the Bellevue Hill land, everything. But now, overnight, her nephews had become normal, and that had smelled like a scam to her from the very beginning. Mrs. Jenkins, where are my nephews? Mrs. Jenkins appeared from the hallway, wiping her hands on her apron. Good morning, Mrs. Rebecca. The boys are. I don't care where they are right now. I want to see the new housekeeper, the one who's brainwashing them. What's her name? Hope, madam. Hope, Rebecca shouted towards the ceiling, as if the woman were floating upstairs. Hope, come down right now. Hope came down the stairs with her usual calm. She wore the immaculate royal blue and white uniform, her hair neatly tied back without a single strand out of place, and serene green eyes like 2 ponds. She stopped 3 steps from Rebecca, her hands crossed over her apron. Good morning, madam. How may I help you? Rebecca looked her up and down. Then she let out a dry laugh. So you're the famous Hope. At your service, madam. Look at her. Young, fair-skinned, green eyes, princess manners. Anyone would say you come from a good family, but no, right? You're an employee, a little employee, just one of the crowd. Mrs. Jenkins opened her mouth to protest. Rebecca silenced her with a raised hand. Mrs. Jenkins, retire. This is between her and me. Mrs. Rebecca, with all due respect, retire. Mrs. Jenkins, fists clenched, went into the kitchen. She pressed her ear against the door to listen. Rebecca walked around Hope as if she were a cow at a livestock auction. She touched her uniform sleeve, looked at her nails, sniffed her hair. You smell of cheap soap. That's the only humble thing about you. Where do you come from? From outback Queensland, madam. From a small farming town. Family? They died, madam. Husband? He died, madam. Children? Hope didn't answer. She lowered her gaze a millimeter, just a millimeter. But Rebecca, who had been hunting weaknesses in people for 30 years, noticed it like a red flag. I asked if you have children. No, madam, I don't. Are you sure? Yes, madam. Rebecca smiled, a viper's smile. Look, Hope, I'm going to tell you something woman to woman. I am Mr. Arthur's sister. I am the only aunt these 4 boys have, and I don't like what you're doing in this house. I don't like you cooking my deceased sister-in-law's food. I don't like you hanging photographs that aren't yours. I don't like my nephews calling you Hope instead of Miss. And above all, I don't like that this house, which is a house of millions, is being looked after by a stranger whose origins no one knows. Madam, I'm just doing my job. Your job is to serve, to shut up, and to disappear, not to worm your way into the heart of this family. Understood? Yes, madam. Good. Now go to the kitchen and make me a black coffee. No sugar. I'll wait for my nephews in the main living room. Hope bowed her head and withdrew without saying anything more. But Rebecca hadn't come for coffee. Rebecca had come to investigate. As soon as Hope disappeared down the hallway, Rebecca took out her phone and dialed a number she had saved under the name Mr. Wallace. Wallace, it's me. I need you to investigate a person. Urgently. Name, Hope Evans, 30 years old, from a town in outback Queensland, domestic employee of the Kingston family. I need to know everything. Past, family, debts, children, spouses, criminal record, everything. I'll pay whatever you ask, but I want it by Friday. She hung up. She smiled and walked to the main living room with the lethal elegance of a woman who knows exactly how to destroy a life. 3 days later, on Friday, at 7 p.m., Mr. Wallace arrived at Rebecca's house in Vaucluse with a yellow manila envelope. It was 4 centimeters thick. Inside was a complete report. Rebecca opened it with fingers trembling with excitement. She read, reread, and let out a long, deep, almost diabolical laugh. I've got you, housekeeper. I've got you by the hair. The report said everything. It said things Hope hadn't even told Mrs. Jenkins. It said that Hope Evans had been born in a small farming town in outback Queensland, into a poor farming family, that she had married a man named Jack Evans at 18, who worked as a builder, that at 20 she had had a son, a single son, a boy named Jared Evans, and that child had died at 8 years old of leukemia. In a public hospital in Sydney, the report included copies of the child's death certificate, a copy of the medical certificate, a copy of the hospital record, and it included something else, something Rebecca read twice because she couldn't believe her good fortune. The record stated that the child had died because his parents had not been able to afford the experimental treatment that would have saved his life. It cost $600,000. Jack, the father, had gone into debt with loan sharks to raise $200,000. Hope had sold her deceased parents' only house to get another $150,000, but they were still short $250,000, and no one had lent it to them. The child had died on a Friday at 4 a.m., held by his mum in a shared hospital room. 3 months later, Jack, the father, had died of a heart attack at 28. The loan sharks were pressing. Hope was left alone, without a son, without a husband, without a house, without anything. She worked as a domestic employee for the next 10 years in 6 different houses in Sydney. The last house had been that of a doctor who had died of cancer. Hope had nursed the doctor until the end, and the doctor's family had given her a letter of recommendation that led her to the agency that sent her to the Kingston house. But there was a detail, a small detail, a detail buried on page 27 of the report. The doctor's letter of recommendation stated that Hope was a certified informal palliative care nurse, and it included a certificate from the Royal Public Hospital where Hope had worked as a volunteer auxiliary nurse for 2 years before her son died. Specialty: care for terminal cancer patients. Rebecca froze, closed the envelope, opened it again, closed it. Wallace, she whispered. Is this confirmed? Confirmed, Mrs. Rebecca. I spoke personally with 2 nurses at the Royal Public Hospital who knew her. That woman worked 2 years caring for terminal cancer patients. Then she left to care for her own sick son. The child died. She went back to working as a domestic employee because she couldn't bear to be in hospitals anymore. In which hospital was Beatrice, my sister-in-law, treated? Street Jude's Private Hospital, madam. And before Street Jude's? Royal Public Hospital, madam. First diagnosis, Mrs. Beatrice spent 3 weeks in oncology at the Royal Public Hospital before her husband moved her to the private Street Jude's. Rebecca sprang from her chair so quickly that her glass of red wine fell to the floor. The glass shattered on the marble. The wine spread like a stain of blood. Are you telling me, Wallace, that housekeeper knew my sister-in-law in the hospital? I'm not telling you that, madam. I'm saying there's a possibility. The dates coincide. How can you not tell me that? That woman entered my house because she knew my sister-in-law. That woman is not just any employee. That woman planned this from the beginning. She came to sit at my brother's table and claim my nephew's inheritance. Rebecca paced her living room like a caged beast. She clutched the yellow envelope to her chest as if it were a bomb. Her eyes shone with hatred and joy. Wallace, listen carefully. Don't tell anyone. This envelope doesn't exist. This investigation never happened. Understood? Understood, madam. I need you to find out just one more thing. Did Beatrice, my sister-in-law, personally know this Hope Evans at the Royal Public Hospital? I'll find out, madam, but it will cost more. Whatever the cost. I want proof, photographs, records, testimonies, whatever. I want to destroy that woman in front of my brother and in front of my nephews. I want that when I denounce her, she doesn't have a single clean nail left. Wallace stood up and left. Rebecca was left alone in the living room with the yellow envelope pressed against her chest. She walked to the large window. She looked at the lights of Sydney spreading at her feet like a sea of gold and smiled. "Little Hope Evans," she murmured, "you are a serpent disguised as a sheep, but I am an older and more venomous serpent. I will peel your skin off in front of the whole family, and my brother will thank me for it." What Rebecca didn't know, what no human being knew yet, was that Hope's secret was much deeper, more painful, and more sacred than any detective's report could reveal, and that the full truth, when it came to light, would not destroy Hope, it would destroy Rebecca. But that was weeks away. Meanwhile, that same night, in the kitchen of the Kingston mansion, Hope peeled carrots in silence. Samuel entered without warning, gave her a quick kiss on the cheek, the first of his life, and said, "Hope, Dad is coming back tomorrow from Hong Kong. You'll finally get to know him properly, and you'll see he's a good man. He's just lost, like we were." Hope smiled sadly. "Young Samuel, do you know what I'm going to say to your dad when I see him?" "What?" "Nothing. I'm the employee. I don't say anything to the employer unless he asks me first." Samuel laughed. "Well, I hope he asks you a lot, because you have many good things to say." He left the kitchen whistling. Hope continued peeling carrots, and outside, in the darkness of the garden, the lights of Mrs. Rebecca's car drove away towards the exit. The magnate's sister left with the yellow envelope tucked into her Hermes bag. The war had just begun. "I swear on Mum's grave, Dad, if you leave again tomorrow, you won't have sons when you come back. You'll have 4 strangers with your surname." Matthew uttered these words in the main dining room, standing in front of his father, his voice trembling but firm. It was a Thursday night. Arthur had just returned from Hong Kong after 3 weeks away. He had only been in the house for 4 hours and was already checking his phone. To confirm his next flight, Tokyo, departure Saturday at 11 p.m., Arthur slowly put down his phone. He looked at his eldest son as if seeing him for the first time in years. "Matthew, don't talk to me like that. I'm your father. I'm the owner of this house." "Father? You're not much of one." Andrew stood up from his chair. "Matthew, leave it." "No, Andrew, let him hear. Let him hear at least once in his life." "Dad, you've been away for a whole year. A whole year since we buried Mum. You've been to this house exactly 13 times. I counted them. 13. Last time you stayed 48 hours and didn't even ask us how we were. You locked yourself in your study making calls. You left without saying goodbye. I'm working for you, son. Everything I do is so that you have. We don't want more, Dad," Daniel shouted from the other end of the table. "We don't want more money. We want a dad." Arthur fell silent. Samuel, the youngest, said nothing. His eyes were fixed on his plate. Hope, who was serving dessert, froze with the tray in her hands. She tried to withdraw in silence. "Hope," Arthur said without looking at her. "Stay. Don't go." "Sir, this is a family conversation. I shouldn't." "Stay," I said. Hope lowered her gaze and stood by the sideboard with her hands crossed over her apron. Arthur watched her for 3 seconds. It seemed strange to him how the 4 boys seemed to be attentive to her without being so. How Samuel subtly offered her a chair with his gaze. How Matthew lowered his tone when she entered the dining room, but he was too tired, too distracted by the Tokyo contract to stop and think about what was happening. "Matthew, we'll talk tomorrow. Today I'm dead. I have jet lag. Tomorrow you'll leave, Dad." "I'm not leaving. I have a flight on Saturday." "You'll leave. You always leave." Arthur got up from his chair, left his napkin on the plate. "Good night, boys." He went upstairs without tasting the dessert. At the table, the 4 brothers remained in silence. Hope approached to clear the employer's plate. Matthew lightly touched her arm without looking up. "Hope, don't worry, we're used to it. Young man, your dad loves you. It's just that he doesn't know how to say it." "No, Hope, my dad doesn't love us. He loves his company. That's different." Hope fell silent. She picked up the plate, walked towards the kitchen, but before leaving the dining room, she stopped and said in a low voice, "Young man, my dad also didn't know how to say it, and one day he died. And I understood too late that he had loved me all his life in silence. Don't wait for yours to die to realize. Talk to him, seek him out, even if it hurts." She left the kitchen without waiting for a reply. The four brothers stared at the empty doorway through which she had disappeared. That same night, late, Arthur's phone rang in his bedroom. It was Rebecca, Arthur answered reluctantly. "Brother, have you met the new housekeeper?" "Rebecca, it's 11:30. I'm dead." "Arthur, listen to me. That woman is not normal. She's manipulating the boys. I have information, things you'll want to know. Tomorrow, I'm coming to your house at 10. "Rebecca, I can't tomorrow. I have meetings all day. I'm leaving for Tokyo on Saturday." "Arthur, for God's sake, don't you realize what's happening in your own house?" "Rebecca, my sons are fine. Matthew complained to me at dinner." "That means he has. Daniel looks healthy. Samuel spoke little, but he doesn't seem drugged. It's the most normal I've seen them in years." "Yes, it was the housekeeper. Long live the housekeeper." "Arthur, good night, Rebecca." He hung up. Rebecca stood with the phone pressed to her ear for a full minute. Then she threw it against the bed with such fury that the case broke. Her brother was an idiot, a blind idiot. But she had patience. She would wait. The time would come. The next day, Friday, Arthur went to the office before the boys woke up. On Saturday at 11 p.m., his private jet took off for Tokyo. The four sons waved him off from the second-floor window without him knowing. 3 weeks passed, and during those 3 weeks, the Kingston house transformed completely. Matthew changed first. He returned to university, yes, but he did something else. He started waking up at 6:30 a.m. to have breakfast with Hope. Before going to class, he would sit on a kitchen stool in his pajamas, hair disheveled, and tell Hope about his previous day, what he had learned, what worried him. Hope would serve him eggs with baked beans and respond without lecturing. She listened to him. That was the strangest thing of all. That woman listened. And at 21, Matthew discovered that he had never been listened to like that in his life. His mum had loved him very much, but his mum had been ill for the last 3 years. His dad had never known how to listen to anyone. The staff were afraid. His friends only wanted to party. And suddenly, in the kitchen, there was an employee in a blue uniform who said, "Young man, tell me how your commercial law assignment went." And she said it as if she really cared. Andrew formally enrolled in architecture. He started bringing home books by Tadao Ando, by Glenn Murcutt, by Frank Lloyd Wright. He would read them in the living room while Hope knitted a jumper in the armchair opposite. Andrew would show her photographs of famous buildings and explain why he liked them. Hope, who had only finished year 6, listened attentively and sometimes said things that left Andrew thinking for days. Once she told him, "Young man, beautiful houses are those that let you see the sky from inside. That's why people in my country town like courtyards. When a house covers the sky, it suffocates you." Andrew wrote it in his notebook. He underlined it 3 times. Daniel completed 3 months clean. He went to his rehabilitation meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Hope never asked him where he was going, but on Tuesdays and Thursdays, without fail, she would prepare him a ham and cheese sandwich and an apple in a paper bag for him to take, without saying anything, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Daniel, who hadn't received a sandwich prepared by anyone since he was 12, cried silently in the car before entering the meeting. And Samuel, the youngest, the most rebellious, took the strangest step of all. One afternoon he came home from school, took off his uniform jacket, and began to set the table for dinner. Mrs. Jenkins, who saw him from the hallway, almost fainted. Samuel had never set a table in his life. He didn't know where the cutlery went. Hope came into the kitchen, saw him struggling with the forks, and approached without laughing. "Young man, the fork goes to the left, the spoon and knife go to the right, the knife always with the blade facing the plate." "Why with the blade to the plate?" "Because that way, if someone fights at dinner, the knife doesn't point at their neighbor. It's a gesture of peace, young man. The mums from my country town taught me that." Samuel laughed. But that night he set the entire table by himself and continued to do so every day. One night, while Hope served dinner, Samuel said out of nowhere, next Friday would have been Mum's birthday. She would have been 52. The other 3 brothers froze. "Do you want to do something?" Matthew asked softly. "I do," Daniel said. "Me too," Andrew said. Samuel looked at Hope. "Hope, would you help us organize a lunch? Like Mum used to do, chicken noodle soup, rice, roast meat, and, I don't know, something else." Hope carefully placed the jug on the table. She remained silent for a moment. "Young Samuel, do you want your mum to be present at that lunch?" "Yes." "Then I will do something. But don't forbid me afterwards." "What are you going to do?" Matthew asked. "I'm going to set a plate for her, like my mum used to do in my country town on important days. A plate served with her favorite food in the place where she used to sit. Not for her to eat, young man, but so she knows we are waiting for her, so her soul feels it has a seat at her table. The four brothers looked at each other. "Do it, Hope," Andrew said, his voice cracking. "Please, and one more thing, young men. Would you let me pray before eating? A short prayer for her." Matthew hesitated for a second. He remembered that his dad hated praying in the house, but his dad wouldn't be there that day. His dad would be in New York signing some contract no one cared about. "Yes, Hope, we'll pray. And will you teach us?" Samuel asked. "Because honestly, none of us know how to pray." Hope smiled for the first time in the entire conversation, a smile with green eyes full of tears. "I'll teach you, my sons. It's the easiest prayer in the world. Anyone can learn it." That same night, the four brothers sat in the kitchen with Hope and learned, word for word, the Our Father. Matthew cried in silence. Daniel stumbled 3 times. Andrew wrote it on a napkin so as not to forget it. Samuel closed his eyes and repeated the prayer so many times that Hope had to tell him, "Young man, you already know it. Go to sleep." And the next day, when Hope went down to the kitchen at 5:30 a.m., she found a white envelope on the table with her name handwritten on it. It was Samuel's handwriting. She opened it. It was an old birthday card Beatrice had sent to Samuel when he turned 10. The card had a message written by Beatrice. "Samuel, my baby, you are the light of my life. Mum loves you." Samuel had added below in shaky handwriting, "Hope, thank you for bringing my mum back. Even if you're not her, I love you as if you were." Hope clutched the card to her chest, and on the other side of the world, on a private plane flying over the Pacific, Arthur Kingston received an email from his assistant. "Mr. Kingston, I remind you that next Friday is Mrs. Beatrice's birthday. May she rest in peace. Would you like a floral arrangement sent to the grave?" Arthur read the email. He froze for 10 minutes, staring at the screen. He had forgotten his dead wife's birthday, and for the first time in a whole year, he decided to cancel a trip. 60 years of life, and never in my existence have I felt so much shame of myself as now. Arthur Kingston thought those words, standing at his dining room door with tears rolling down his face, watching his 4 sons pray beside a domestic employee he barely knew. The vase in the hallway was still shattered on the marble floor behind him. The crash had broken the moment. All 5 had turned to look at him at the same time, and now everyone was frozen in a scene that seemed painted in oils. Matthew slowly rose from his chair. His face was pale. His napkin fell to the floor unnoticed. "Dad, are you all right?" Arthur couldn't speak. He wanted to say something. He wanted to greet them. He wanted to put on the face of an employer returning home and finding his family, but his body didn't respond. The tears rolled down without permission, without dignity, without restraint. It was the first time in 12 months that he had cried about anything. He had buried his wife without shedding a single tear. He had become pure pride, dry bone, a businessman. And now, standing at the door of his own dining room, in front of a silver ladle and the smell of chicken noodle soup, he cried like a lost child. Hope was the first to move. She lowered her gaze respectfully, took 2 steps back, and said in a low voice, almost a whisper, "Young men, I'll leave you with your dad. I'll retire to the kitchen." "No." The voice came from Arthur, barely a thread, but firm. "Don't go, please." Hope stopped. She stood by the sideboard with her hands crossed over her apron. Without looking at her employer, Arthur slowly entered the dining room. Each step felt heavy, as if he had lead in his shoes. His 4 sons watched him without moving, as if afraid of scaring a deer. He reached the back of the main chair, the chair where he had had breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 30 years, with Beatrice beside him. He placed his hands on the wood. He felt the engraving of the family crest that he himself had commissioned the year they married. He looked up at the wall, at the 3 framed portraits, his 4 sons when they were children, the photographs he had ordered to the basement, the ones Beatrice had kept wrapped in newspaper, the ones a domestic employee had rescued, cleaned, and hung a year after her death. "Who?" Arthur cleared his throat. His voice came out broken. "Who hung these photographs?" Matthew took a step forward. "It was Hope, Dad. Almost 3 months ago she found them in the basement, cleaned them." Arthur closed his eyes. The tears continued to fall with his eyes closed. "And why did no one tell me?" "Because you weren't here, Dad. And when you were, you didn't ask." Arthur nodded in silence. He was right. His 1-year-old son was right about everything. He had been fleeing that house for a year, and the corners of the house had accused him in silence. The photographs, the soup, the prayers, the birthday, everything had been built by another person while he signed contracts in Tokyo. "Sons," Arthur murmured, "what day is today?" Samuel, the youngest, replied with the calmest voice he had ever been heard to use. Today is Mum's birthday, Dad. She would have been 52. Arthur put both hands to his face. He cried without shame. He cried in front of his 4 sons and the employee. He cried 12 months of stored tears, 12 months of postponed grief, 12 months of pride gnawing at his soul. The 4 boys didn't move. None approached to hug him. They were so accustomed to the distance from their father that they no longer knew how to cross it. But Samuel, the baby, the most rebellious, the one who in 6 months had learned to set a table for a domestic employee, got up from his chair. He walked around the table and hugged his father for the first time in 5 years. Dad, calm down. Mum is here, and come eat with us. Arthur clung to his youngest son as if to the last plank of a shipwreck. Samuel held him in silence. The other 3 brothers approached slowly. Matthew put a hand on his shoulder. Andrew took his arm. Daniel, the quietest, just stayed nearby without touching him, but without moving. When Arthur managed to regain his breath, he pulled away from Samuel, wiped his face with his jacket sleeve. He, who always carried a silk handkerchief, this time didn't even remember the handkerchief. He looked into his youngest son's eyes. Samuel, do you want to eat with me? Dad, do you want to eat with us? The question sounded backward, and at the same time, it wasn't the right question. It was the only possible question because that lunch wasn't Arthur's. Arthur had been the guest. His sons were the hosts. Hope had been the silent architect of the moment, and the backward question returned each one to their true place. Yes, son, I want to eat with you. Arthur sat in the main chair. Samuel returned to his. Hope, without anyone asking her, went for an extra plate from the kitchen. She brought it, placed it in front of Arthur with the same delicacy with which one serves an ailing elder. She served him the chicken noodle soup. The smell of herbs and chicken broth hit his face like a memory, but before Arthur picked up his spoon, Hope approached the 4th place at the table. A place where there was a served plate, a glass of water, a folded white napkin, an empty place, the place where Beatrice used to sit. Arthur saw the plate, and his breath caught. Why is there a plate there? It's for Mum, Dad, Andrew said. Hope told us that in her country town in outback Queensland, Mum set a served plate for beloved deceased ones. Not for them to eat, Dad, but so they know they have a place. Arthur looked at Hope for the first time with attention. For the first time in 6 months, he really looked at her and saw a fair-skinned young woman with serene green eyes, wearing her immaculate blue and white uniform, standing by the sideboard with her hands crossed and her head slightly bowed. He didn't see an employee. He saw a woman. Hope. Yes, sir. Come closer. Hope took 2 steps towards the table. She stopped at a respectful distance. Hope, did you think of the plate thing? Yes, sir. I apologize if I overstepped my bounds. If you wish, I will remove it. No, don't remove it. Arthur stared at the empty plate for a full minute. Then he lifted his face and looked at his 4 sons one by one. Boys, before we eat, I want to ask your permission to do something I haven't done in 30 years. What, Dad? Matthew asked. I want to pray. The 4 brothers fell silent. Hope too. The air in the dining room stilled. Arthur Kingston, the magnate, the proud atheist, the one who had mocked Beatrice all his life for her pious prayers, the one who had forbidden Sunday school to his children, was asking permission to pray. Hope, Arthur said without looking at her. Do you know a short prayer? I never learned one. Hope took 2 seconds to respond. Her lip was trembling. Yes, sir. The Our Father is the easiest. Will you teach me, Hope? Your sons already know it. Arthur looked at his sons. You know how to pray? Hope taught us 2 weeks ago, Dad, Samuel said. All 4 of us know it. Arthur fell silent. Then, sons, will you teach me? And then something happened that no human being in that house would have imagined a year ago. Mr. Arthur Kingston, the owner of one of Australia's largest construction empires, bowed his head, clasped his hands on the white tablecloth, closed his eyes, and repeated, word for word, the Our Father, which his 4 sons dictated to him in low voices, with Hope standing by the sideboard, pressing her apron to her chest so as not to cry aloud. When they finished, Arthur opened his eyes. He didn't speak for a long time, just looked at the plate of soup in front of him, Beatrice's empty plate, and the portraits of his sons hanging on the wall. Then he took the spoon, tasted the soup, and felt, without exaggeration, that the taste was exactly the same as his dead wife's, even down to the salt. Hope, Arthur said, his voice heavy. Who taught you to cook? My mum, sir. Did your mum know mine? Because this soup tastes exactly like the one my mum used to make us when we were little. Hope smiled sadly. No, sir. My mum never left her country town, But good soups are all alike, sir, because they're made with the same recipe. Which recipe? Time, sir. A lot of time, and a little bit of love for the one who's going to eat it. Arthur paused with the spoon in the air. The four brothers continued eating in silence. Hope left for the kitchen with a couple of dirty plates, and while Arthur continued to stare at the spoon, thinking about what that woman had just told him, the doorbell rang with 3 sharp, insistent knocks. 3 knocks he recognized immediately, because only one person in the world knocked the doorbell like that: his sister, Rebecca. Mrs. Jenkins opened the door. Rebecca's voice was heard from the foyer, already entering, already shouting, "Where is my brother and the housekeeper?" "Arthur, Arthur, I have to show you something before it's too late." Arthur dropped his spoon. Hope, who was entering the dining room at that moment with a jug of fresh water, froze in the doorway, and Rebecca appeared behind her with a yellow envelope clutched in her hand, her eyes shining with hatred, a viper's smile drawn on her face. "Brother, look what I brought you. Look who the saint is. You have serving you soup at your own table." She threw the yellow envelope onto the table, right next to Beatrice's empty plate. "Open it, Arthur. Read it in front of your sons. Read it in front of her. See if after reading this, the soup still tastes good to you. This woman is not a housekeeper, Arthur. This woman is a liar, a fortune hunter, a vulture disguised as a dove." Rebecca shouted, standing in the middle of the dining room, her heels clicking on the marble, the yellow envelope still vibrating on the table next to Beatrice's empty plate. Her blood-red pantsuit shimmered under the chandelier light. Her eyes burned like embers. She smelled of Chanel No. 5 and revenge. "Arthur Stintitha, Dintings, Dinting Vals, Dinting Val Felis, Dinting, Golok, Dinting Vile, Dinting Fime, Golok, Dinting Fime Sams, Dinting Vi family's house." "Arthur, I'm your sister. I'm the only family you have left, and the only one telling you the truth. This woman is deceiving you. She's poisoning you. She's manipulating your sons to get your money. And I have it all here, brother. Everything." Rebecca slapped the yellow envelope with her open palm. The sound echoed in the dining room like a gunshot. Hope didn't move. She remained standing in the doorway with the jug of water in her hands. Her gaze was lowered, her cheeks slightly flushed. But she wasn't trembling. She wasn't defending herself. She wasn't opening her mouth. Matthew rose from his chair, his face pale. "Aunt, I ask you please not to speak to Hope like that in my house." "Your house, Matthew? This house is your father's, and your father has just arrived after a whole year away to discover that you've been brainwashed by an employee." "No one brainwashed me, Aunt." "Of course they did, Matthew. Look at you praying. You, praying. You, who 6 months ago mocked pious people. How can you tell me this woman didn't put ideas in your head?" Daniel stood up. Andrew stood up. Samuel stood up. The 4 brothers stood up at the same time, forming a wall in front of their aunt. "Aunt Rebecca," Samuel said, his voice colder than it had ever been heard. "Grab your envelope, turn around, and leave this house. You don't talk to me like that, brat. I'm your aunt. Aunt, please leave right now." "Arthur, are you going to let your sons talk to me like this to defend a stranger?" Arthur fell silent. He looked at his 4 sons standing beside Hope. He looked at his sister, who had been manipulating him for 30 years, criticizing him, putting ideas in his head about his own business. He looked at Hope, standing in silence with the jug of water, not defending herself, not speaking, not fleeing. And for the first time in many years, Arthur made a decision without thinking about numbers. "Rebecca, sit down." "What?" "Sit down. We're going to see what you have in that envelope, but you're going to sit down. You're going to speak in a normal tone, and you're going to respect the woman who has fed my children for 6 months while I was away. Arthur, this woman is a—" "Sit down." Arthur's shout cut through the air. Rebecca took a step back. Never in 60 years of life together had her younger brother shouted at her like that. She swallowed. She sat down. Arthur looked at Hope. "Hope, can you come closer, please?" "Yes, sir." "Leave the jug. Come, sit here next to me." "Sir, I cannot sit at your table. Please." "Hope. Today, yes." Hope put the jug on the sideboard. She walked to the table. Matthew pulled a chair closer for her. Hope sat next to Arthur with her hands crossed over her apron, her head slightly bowed. Rebecca let out a bitter laugh. "To the top, Arthur, seating the housekeeper at your table." "Rebecca, open the envelope. Read it." "I'm listening." Rebecca took the yellow envelope, opened it with hands, trembling with emotion, took out the sheets, spread them in front of her like a prosecutor in a trial. "Well, brother, here's the truth. The lady sitting next to you is called Hope Evans. She was born in a small farming town in outback Queensland, daughter of poor farmers. She married a builder named Jack Evans at 18. She had a son at 20. Hope closed her eyes for an instant, just an instant. Her son was named Jared Evans and died at 8 years old of leukemia in a public hospital because his parents didn't have the money to pay for the treatment that would have saved his life. Arthur slowly turned his head towards Hope. "Is this true, Hope?" Hope lifted her face. Her green eyes were clouded, but her voice was firm. "It's true, sir. You told me you didn't have children. I lied, sir. I lied to Mrs. Jenkins the day she hired me. I lied to the agency. I lied to everyone. I was afraid they wouldn't give me work if I said I was a broken woman. Why didn't you tell me, Hope? You never asked me anything, sir." Arthur felt those words pierce him like a knife. She was right. He had gone 6 months without speaking 5 consecutive words to the woman who was caring for his children. He had signed her name on a paper and forgotten her. Rebecca slammed the table. "This isn't the worst, Arthur. The worst is here." She pulled another sheet from the envelope, holding it up like a flag. "This woman is not just a widow with a dead son. This woman is a nurse, Arthur. She worked 2 years as an auxiliary nurse at the Royal Public Hospital in Sydney. Specialty: palliative care for terminal cancer patients." Arthur frowned. "And what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that, Arthur? Wake up. Your wife Beatrice spent 3 weeks in oncology at the Royal Public Hospital before you moved her to St. Jude's. This woman knew your wife. This woman took care of her. This woman planned everything from the beginning. That's why she knows her recipes. That's why she knows how to cook exactly the same. That's why she knew where the photographs were kept. This woman entered your house with a plan, brother." The dining room fell into a deadly silence. Matthew looked at Hope. His heart stopped. Daniel's eyes widened. Andrew put his hand to his mouth. Samuel turned pale. Arthur turned his whole body towards Hope. He stared at her. "Hope, look me in the face." Hope slowly lifted her face. "Did you know my wife, Beatrice?" Hope didn't answer immediately. She swallowed. Tears rolled silently down her pale cheeks. She didn't wipe them. She didn't tremble. She just looked at Arthur with those serene green eyes that seemed to contain an ocean of ancient pain. "Yes, sir." The dining room froze. Matthew took 2 steps back. "What?" Samuel murmured. "Hope, what did you say?" "I knew her, my son. I knew your mum. For 3 weeks at the Royal Public Hospital. I was one of the nurses on the oncology ward when she was first admitted." Arthur felt his world collapse. "And why did you never tell me?" "Because I had nothing to say, sir, and because I didn't want you to find out that way. Not like this, not with a yellow envelope on the table." Rebecca let out a victorious laugh. She confessed. "Arthur, she just confessed in front of everyone. This woman is a fortune hunter. She met your dying wife in the hospital, saw the money, waited for her to die, waited a whole year so as not to arouse suspicion, and entered your house with a master plan to claim your fortune and your children's inheritance. Get her out of here, brother. Get her out before it's too late." Arthur couldn't speak. His 4 sons looked at Hope, expecting an explanation, a denial, a defense, anything. But Hope didn't defend herself. She rose from the chair in silence, carefully smoothed the napkin on the table, untied her white apron, and folded it perfectly. She placed it over the back of the chair. She looked at the 4 boys one by one, with a tenderness that broke their hearts. "Young Matthew, Andrew, Daniel, Samuel, forgive me for not telling you the truth. I knew your mum. I knew her very little, but I knew her, and everything I have given you, everything I have cooked for you, everything I have taught you in these months has been because of her. Not for money, young men. I am not a self-serving woman, and if your dad wants me to leave, I will leave this very night. I only ask you one favor. Don't fight among yourselves because of me. Keep praying. Keep putting up the portraits. Keep remembering your mum. That's all I ask of you." She walked towards the dining room door, but before leaving, she stopped. She turned her face to Arthur and said in the calmest voice she had ever been heard to use, "Sir, your sister is right about one thing. I knew your wife, and I should have told you from the first day, but she is also wrong about another. I did not enter this house for money, sir. I entered this house because your wife, before she died, asked me to. When you want to know the whole truth, go up to the staff quarters at the back. I'll be there packing." She left the dining room. The silence was absolute. Matthew collapsed into his chair. Andrew covered his face. Daniel felt something break in his chest. Samuel walked to his father and said, his voice cracking, "Dad, go up right now and ask her everything. Please, don't let her go." Arthur put his hand to his chest. His heart pounded as if it would burst. He looked at Rebecca, who was smiling victoriously. He looked at his sons, whose eyes were red. He looked at the open yellow envelope on the table next to Beatrice's empty plate, and then he did the only thing he could do. He pushed his chair back, stood up, and slammed his two clenched fists brutally on the table. Plates jumped. Beatrice's glass fell. Water spilled over the yellow envelope. "Rebecca, out of my house! Arthur, I'm your sister! Out! Rebecca! Out right now, and don't set foot in this house again until I tell you to." Rebecca stood up, pale, clutching her Hermes bag with trembling hands. "Arthur, you'll regret this. I swear on our mother that you'll regret it. Leave." Rebecca clicked her heels to the door. Before leaving, she turned one last time. "That woman will destroy you, brother. And when she does, don't call me." The slamming of the door echoed throughout the house. Arthur stood in the middle of the dining room, with his fists on the table, breathing like a wounded bull. Samuel approached, touched his shoulder. "Dad, go up, please, go up, and talk to her." Arthur looked at his sons and went up the stairs towards the staff quarters at the back. 40 years married to a woman, and I never knew she had a secret kept for the day of her death. Arthur thought that as he climbed the stairs to the second floor, gripping the wooden banister as if he were 80 instead of 60. Each step weighed heavily. Each step brought back a memory. Beatrice going up and down with a child in her arms. Beatrice carrying Christmas trees. Beatrice slowly climbing the last few months, when the cancer no longer allowed her to walk well, and he, instead of helping her, locked himself in his study on the first floor so as not to see her suffer. He reached the back hallway, walked to the last door, the staff quarters, the smallest, simplest, and most remote room in the house. A room he had set foot in exactly twice in 30 years. He knocked on the door with his knuckles. "Hope, it's Arthur. May I come in?" "Come in, sir." He slowly pushed the door open. Hope was sitting on the edge of the single bed. She had placed her suitcase on the mattress and was filling it with her few belongings. 3 folded uniforms, 2 street dresses, a rosary, a worn Bible. On the bedside table was a small framed photograph that Arthur couldn't quite make out. "Hope, don't go." "Sir, I've packed almost everything. I'll be ready in 2 hours." "Don't go, please." "Sir, your sister is right about some things. I lied to you. I am not who you thought." "Hope, I need you to tell me the whole truth, please." Hope left the folded uniform on the suitcase. She stared at her hands for a minute. Arthur grabbed the only chair in the room and moved it closer to the bed. He sat down. He waited. Hope took a breath. "Sir, 12 years ago I was 20 years old, a builder husband, and a newborn son. We lived in a rented room in Logan. We were poor, sir, but we were happy. My husband loved me. My son was named Jared, just like his dad. He was a beautiful boy, sir. Light brown hair, green eyes like mine, a full moon smile." Arthur let her speak without interruption. "At 6 years old, my little Jared started complaining of bone pain. We took him to the neighborhood doctor. He told us it was fatigue, that he played too much. At 7 years old, he fell at school and got a bruise that wouldn't go away. We took him again, another doctor. This time they sent us for tests, and 2 weeks later, sitting in a plastic chair at the Royal Public Hospital, an oncologist told us the word. Leukemia. Hope clasped her hands in her lap. My husband, sir, couldn't bear it. 3 months after that diagnosis, he died of a heart attack at a construction site. He was 28. I was left alone with a sick child and a huge debt. We started a treatment that Medicare paid for, but the hospital doctors told me there was an experimental protocol that gave the child an 80% chance of survival. It cost $600,000. We didn't have it. I sold the house my parents left me. I raised $350,000. I borrowed everywhere. I couldn't get enough. Arthur felt something rise in his throat, and then my little Jared slowly died. Sir, one Friday morning at 4 a.m. he squeezed my hand and said, "Mum, don't cry. I'll be fine up there." And he fell asleep and didn't wake up. Hope shed 2 tears, just 2, like controlled drops. After that, sir, I didn't want to go on living. I tried to take my own life 3 times. The first with pills, the second on a rooftop, the third with a kitchen knife. All 3 times, someone stopped me. The last time was a little nun from the neighborhood. She told me, "Daughter, if God keeps you alive, it's because you have something left to do. Find it." And she offered me a job caring for elderly people at the aged care home where she worked. Hope looked up. I was at the aged care home for 2 years, sir. Then I joined as a volunteer at the Royal Public Hospital. Then I was certified as an auxiliary nurse. I worked 2 years in the oncology ward caring for other mums, other children, other terminal patients. It was my way of continuing to care for my little Jared, sir. I saw him in every patient. Arthur closed his eyes. "Hope, when did you meet Beatrice?" Hope took a deep breath. "Almost 2 years ago, sir. Your wife arrived at the oncology ward one Monday morning with a high fever. They did tests, diagnosed her with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. They told her she had between 6 and 9 months to live. You were in Germany that day, I heard. You sent your assistant, Mrs. Beatrice stayed 3 weeks admitted to the Royal Public Hospital before you changed her to St. Jude's when you returned. Arthur covered his face with both hands. I was in Frankfurt closing a contract. I told Beatrice to hold on, that as soon as I returned I would move her to the best hospital. I told her that the Royal Public Hospital was not for people like us. Sir, I was the nurse assigned to her room during those 3 weeks. Arthur dropped his hands, looked at Hope with red eyes. You were my wife's nurse. I was the one who gave her saline solution, who gave her food, who bathed her with a sponge when she could no longer stand up, who prayed the rosary with her at night when she was afraid, who stroked her hair until she fell asleep. Your wife, sir, was an extraordinary woman. I had never cared for anyone so patient, so sweet, so grateful. Although she had money, she didn't treat us like staff, she treated us like daughters. Arthur began to cry silently. One night, sir, 2 days before you returned from Frankfurt, Mrs. Beatrice took my hand. I was finishing changing her saline. She looked at me intently and told me something I haven't been able to get out of my head since. She said, Hope, do you have children? I told her I no longer did. I told her about my little Jared. We both cried together. Then she told me, Hope, I have 4 sons, 4 boys, and I'm going to die soon. I know it. My husband is a good man, but he's lost in his work. My sons will be left alone. Swear to me that if someday you find them crying on a bench, you will pick them up. Swear it to me, Hope. From woman to woman, from mum to mum. Arthur collapsed, fell to his knees on the floor of the staff quarters, put his hands to his face, cried with a force that shook the walls. Hope, he sobbed. Hope, for God's sake. Sir, please get up. This is not for you to humble yourself. Continue, please, continue. Hope remained seated on the bed. She spoke to him from above with a calm voice. I swore it to her, sir. Not for money, not out of self-interest. I swore it because I saw in her eyes the same fear I saw in my little Jared's eyes before he died. Fear of leaving someone who needs you alone. I kissed her hand. I told her, Madam, I swear by my dead son that if I find them, I will care for them. And then, how did you get to my house, sir? 2 days later, you moved her to St. Jude's. I never saw her again. I never even knew the exact date she died, but a year later, a domestic employment agency called me. They told me there was a job in a big house in Bellevue Hill, Kingston family, a widower with 4 sons. They needed a woman who could handle rebellious boys and an absent employer. When I heard the surname Kingston, sir, I felt my soul sink. I asked if the lady's name was Beatrice. They told me yes, that she had died 6 months ago. Hope kept looking at her hands. I accepted the job, sir, but not out of self-interest. I accepted because I understood at that moment why God had. He stopped at the top of the stairs, looking down at his 4 sons who waited in silence in the main dining room. His eyes were red, his hair disheveled, his jacket crumpled, but for the first time in 12 months, he also had something else, a decision made. He slowly descended the stairs. His 4 sons stood up as he entered the dining room. Dad, what happened? Where's Hope? Hope is upstairs. She's not leaving, boys. She's staying with us. Samuel let out the breath he had been holding. Andrew covered his face. Daniel hugged Matthew. Matthew approached his father, and for the first time in 5 years hugged him without formality. Arthur returned the embrace with both arms, holding him tightly against his chest as when he was a child. Sons, sit down. I have something to tell you. Something your mum did for you before she died and that I didn't know, but that you have a right to know. The 4 sat around the table. Arthur sat in the main chair, and for the next 40 minutes, he told them the whole story. The Royal Public Hospital, the 3 weeks, the nurse Hope, the promise Beatrice had made a stranger swear while he signed contracts in Frankfurt. Hope's dead son, the 12 years of silent mourning, the way God, miracles, or Beatrice from heaven had brought them all together at that table. When he finished, the 4 brothers were crying. Samuel was the first to speak. Dad, go up, bring her down, have dinner with us tonight, right now, in Mum's chair. Son, I don't know if she will. Dad, go. And if she doesn't want to, all 5 of us will go up and beg her. Arthur went up the stairs again. This time, the 4 brothers followed him. They knocked together on the door of the staff quarters. Hope opened it. She was arranging, with trembling hands, the photograph of her little Jared on the dresser, where Beatrice's perfumes had once been. Hope, Arthur said, come down and have dinner with us, please. Sir, I cannot sit in your wife's place. It's not my wife's place, Hope. It's the place my wife left for you. It's different. Hope looked at the 4 boys standing behind Arthur. Matthew held her gaze, his eyes full of tears. Samuel extended his hand. Please, Hope. Today is Mum's birthday. Don't leave us alone on her birthday. Hope lowered her head, nodded. That night the 5 of them had dinner together. Arthur in the main chair, Hope in Beatrice's chair, the 4 sons around, and in Beatrice's empty place, a served plate with her favorite food, a glass of fresh water, a folded napkin. No one tasted the food without first praying. Arthur prayed with them for the 2nd time in his life, but this time it no longer seemed so difficult. The next day, Arthur cancelled all his trips for the next 6 months, reorganized the company, delegated, appointed 3 new directors, announced to his board that he would work from Sydney with normal office hours, 8 to 6, and that any international travel would be short and planned in advance. His board was surprised. Arthur gave no explanations, only said, I have 4 sons who need a dad, and it's late. But it's not too late yet. 3 weeks later, Arthur went to the cemetery where Beatrice was buried. He carried a bouquet of white flowers, but he didn't go alone. He took Hope. They walked together to the grave. Arthur placed the flowers, crossed himself. Hope, standing beside him, also crossed herself. Beatrice, Arthur said aloud, I brought you hope. I brought you the woman who fulfilled your promise. I brought you the woman who cared for our sons when I couldn't. I want to ask your forgiveness, Beatrice, for all those years when I didn't understand what was important, and I want to ask your permission for something. Hope looked at him, surprised. I want permission to love this woman, Beatrice. Not as I loved you. What you and I had cannot be repeated, but I want permission to love Hope with the heart I have left. If you give me a contrary sign, I won't do it. I swear it. But if you remain silent, I will take it as permission. Hope put her hand to her mouth. She hadn't expected those words. She had never imagined them. Beatrice gave no contrary sign. The cemetery remained silent. Only the wind moved the ribbons of the wreaths. Arthur took Hope's hand for the first time, just with the tips of his fingers. Hope, will you let me accompany you the rest of the way? Sir, don't tell me you're an employee. That was 6 months ago. 6 months ago I was a ghost in a tie. We both changed, Hope. Because of the same woman, Hope cried uncontrollably. She nodded in silence. 10 months later, Arthur and Hope married in a small chapel in the Southern Highlands, an intimate wedding. Only the 4 sons, Mrs. Jenkins, and Father Michael from the neighborhood where Hope had lived with her little Jared. Hope wore a simple ivory dress, a bouquet of white flowers, and her son's photograph sewn into an inside pocket of her dress over her heart. Arthur wore a pearl gray suit, without a tie, without cufflinks, without an expensive watch. Matthew walked her down the aisle. Samuel was a groomsman. Before the ceremony, the 4 brothers told Hope something she would never forget. They approached her together before entering the chapel, and Matthew spoke for all of them. Hope, today you're marrying my dad, but we want you to know one thing. For us, that already happened a long time ago. For us, you've been our mum since the day you taught us the Our Father. Can we call you mum today without it hurting you, without you feeling like you're replacing anyone? You are another mum, the second, the one who came later. Both are in our hearts. Does that bother you? Hope couldn't speak. She just opened her arms. The 4 hugged her at the same time. Arthur, who saw the scene from the chapel door, cried in silence. 1 year after the wedding, Hope gave birth to a girl. A beautiful girl, with green eyes like hers and dark eyebrows like Arthur's. They gave her the name the 5 of them chose together without needing to argue. Beatrice Hope Kingston, in honor of the 2 mothers, the one in heaven who asked a favor from a public hospital bed, and the one on earth who fulfilled the favor from the staff quarters of a Bellevue Hill mansion. Rebecca never set foot in the Kingston house again. Arthur offered her a generous pension with one condition, never to seek out his family again. Rebecca accepted without offering apologies, without asking for forgiveness, but without returning. She died 5 years later, alone in a private clinic with her Chanel perfume and her jewelry, but with no one beside her. Matthew became a lawyer and joined the legal department of the Kingston Company. Andrew became an architect and designed the extension of the Bellevue Hill house himself. He added a special room for Beatrice Hope, with a balcony to the garden and an inner courtyard where the sky came in, like the houses in outback Queensland. Daniel completed 7 years clean. He became a volunteer for a youth rehabilitation group where he helped other young people get out of the hole as he had. And Samuel, the youngest, the most rebellious, studied medicine, specializing in pediatric oncology. When asked why, he replied, because there was a boy named Jared who couldn't be saved. I want to save the other little Jareds in the world in memory of the one I didn't know, but to whom I owe the mum who cared for me. 7 years passed since Arthur had first arrived home, unannounced at lunchtime. One ordinary Sunday, at 1 p.m., the main dining room of the mansion was full. The same table, the same chandelier, the same sideboard. But now there were 6 people around. Arthur, Hope, the 4 brothers, now young men, professionals, masters of their own lives, and a 6-year-old girl dressed in a light blue dress sat in the place that had once been empty. Beatrice's place, a place now occupied by Beatrice Hope, the youngest daughter, her feet barely touching the floor. On the table, chicken noodle soup, hot bread rolls, white rice, roast lamb with gravy, a recipe that had been made in that house for 32 years. First by Beatrice's hands, then by Hope's hands, now with the help of little Beatrice, who climbed onto a stool next to her mum to stir the pot. Arthur bowed his head. His 4 sons bowed their heads. Hope bowed her head, and little Beatrice Hope, who was just learning, clasped her little hands with the solemnity of a 6-year-old. Arthur said the Our Father aloud. All 6 followed him word for word. When they finished, Arthur lifted his face, looked at his wife, looked at his 5 children, looked at the dining room wall, where there had once been 3 framed portraits of the boys when they were children. Now there were 5. The 3 originals. One new of little Beatrice on her first birthday, and a 5th in the center, larger than the others. A black and white photograph, old, slightly blurred, a young woman with green eyes, sitting on a country fair bench. She held an 8-year-old boy in her lap. The boy wore a baseball cap and held a red balloon in his hand. Both smiled at the camera as if nothing bad could ever happen to them. It was Hope, and it was little Jared, the portrait of the son who hadn't grown up, of the older brother the 4 Kingstons had never known, but for whom they prayed every Sunday before eating. Hope looked at the portrait, smiled through tears, squeezed Arthur's hand under the table, and as little Beatrice Hope said in a high-pitched voice, "Mum, can I have some soup?" In the Sydney sky, above the mansion's roof, 2 women held hands in silence, one in heaven, one on earth, both mothers of the same plate, and the house, which had once been a hell with crystal chandeliers, remained illuminated by a soft, golden, definitive light. The light of the 2 mothers who fulfilled a promise. The end.